You're listening to Let's Figure It Out by Ad Valorem, where we break down business, finance, and tax without the fluff.
From side hustles to audits, we keep it practical, insightful, and even a little bit of fun.
Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to Let's Figure It Out, a podcast where we discuss challenges that face business owners on a day-to-day basis. Today we're uncovering the hidden costs of being the boss.
Yeah, it's not all about the money. It's about the time, stress, and pressure that's also involved that you don't always see from the outside looking in.
We're joined by Alex Black, as Director of Client Services at Ad Valorem. Alex, do you want to give a bit of background about yourself and some of the challenges you see facing business owners?
Yeah, so I've been working in the industry in Ad Valorem for the last 13 years, working really closely with small to medium-sized business owners. And I think the challenge I've seen consistently over that time is the isolation. A lot of business owners feel like they're on their own. There's no one in their business they can relate to or talk to. They're not necessarily someone in their life they can relate to and talk to, and they feel like they've got to deal with all those pressures just on their own.
And I think while it can be isolating for a lot of business owners, I think also what a lot of people don't realise is the effects it has on the wider family and the network as well. So external relationships, not just within the business. I think we can probably talk from our own experiences with having parents that have been entrepreneurs and run businesses that actually potentially your childhood looks somewhat different to what a standard childhood would look like if your parents were just employed. So yeah, we can touch on a few of those bits today. Right, so before we dive in, let's play a quick game of Would You Rather, Boss Edition. Okay? Right, would you rather chase a late payment... Cut. Would you rather... Okay, we're serious now. Cut. Would you rather chase a late payment client or tell a staff member they're underperforming?
Do you want me to go first or you go?
I'd rather chase a late paying client. I think for me, that's a really obvious commercial conversation. You owe this invoice.
Yeah.
Can you please pay it?
Yeah. I'm going to be... Do I have to pick one? Because for me, I'll just do both, right? Because you have to do both. Like, you've got a commercial reason to have to chase the client. You have to have clients pay you. But also, if you've got an underperforming member of the team, there is the kind of counter argument to if they're delivering a subpar product or service, then that needs to be addressed.
I think for your basis and theirs, right? Like a lot of times where I've had to deal with underperformance in the team, it's as much for me as it is for them to know that like what they're doing is not acceptable or that they need to step their game up, and that's for their own development. So I agree, you've got to do both. Chasing the client's easier. So if I was going to pick, the would you rather, actually I'd much rather have that conversation, because most business owners go, yeah, I know I should have paid you that. Actually.
Yeah.
Whereas
you can have a commercial
conversation. A bit harder.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, isn't it? I think if you're a business owner, you have to do both. It's just, it's not really
Cool. Would you rather spend your weekend catching up on admin or deal with a client complaint on a Saturday night?
Oh God, I hate both.
I'll take the complaint.
You take the complaint.
I'll take the complaint.
At least you get to speak to someone, I guess.
I get to have a conversation. Maybe I get to some of the best interactions I've had with clients over the years has been where they come in with an issue, a complaint or problem, and then you hear them, you get to go through it, and you get to like deliver a resolution or a different outcome for them. Sometimes they're awful, but admin's never rewarding.
Well, I don't know if the admin is like sending out an engagement letter you need to get signed, that kind of stuff. But then,
So I guess just to kind of play devil's advocate a bit there regarding the client complaint, if you start corresponding with clients on a Saturday night, are you shooting yourself in the foot for the future? Because are you setting a precedence of timings and when you're allowed to be communicated with?
Yeah, that's a good shout.
And are you kind of wavering on your own boundaries, which I personally think if you're a business owner, they've got to be firm.
Yeah, that's probably fair. It depends how bad the complaint is, in my opinion, and this, like how urgent it needs to be resolved. And what are the odds of it coming in on a Saturday morning? Probably quite slim, or a Friday evening, quite slim. But I think dependent on the severity of the complaint, I think you can kind of manage that. But I think thinking through, some of the best client relationships we've got now are probably clients that have complained in the past, because it's, for me, if you approach it in the right way, as in this is an opportunity for us to either improve or kind of improve on the way that we work together and partner together as a client and accountant or whatever that business is, I think that only moves you forward and moves the relationship forward.
Yeah. Okay. Would you rather lose a big client or lose a key performer of the team?
100% lose a big client.
Lose a big client.
100%. And I think if you've got a key team member, they're worth their weight in gold. And you as much as we value clients, absolutely do. You don't want to chop off the hand that feeds you. For what we do,
client if you lose a key member of staff, right? Like we know key members of staff that are really delivering. Clients are attached to them. They're invaluable to the team. And sometimes big clients aren't always great clients, or they might not be right for you. Like they might be in a different point in their development. They might need different things. And sometimes they do come back. We've seen it where big clients have gone away. They've not necessarily valued what's been delivered, and actually have gone back out there and seen that the grass isn't always greener. And they come back with a stronger and healthier relationship.
100%. Business is all about people.
It's
all about people. Exactly. Totally agree.
So I think, while some of the things that we've discussed are fairly light-hearted and we've only kind of brushed the surface on them, I think they are things that a lot of business owners experience day to day. And I think sometimes as an employee or a member of the team, we actually take for granted what the people at the top are experiencing. And it's not always rainbows and butterflies.
No, absolutely.
Okay, so that leads us on to the next kind of segment of what we're here to talk about. And something that I think is really, really important in today's world is the mental load and the emotional load on business owners and what it means to them mentally and physically to be business owners and running a business.
Yeah. So let's chat through one of the big kind of challenges I see and I guess I've experienced from running a business aspect. So the emotional and mental load that running a business and the emotional toll that it can have on business owners, but also, I guess, their family as well.
Yeah, I think, we see it from an employee side of Ad Valorem, and obviously you see it from the personal family side. I think it's difficult, and I don't think many people respect the fact of what business owners have to go through and the mental and physical toll that takes on their body. They've got things weighing on their shoulders like, employees' financial position. There's probably a lot of guilt around decision making, a lot of pressure around making the right decisions at the right times that are the right for the employees and for the business. You would have cash flow worries. So there's
not selling it
here. There's quite a few parameters that they've got to play around with and that are going to be floating around their head and causing a lot of sleepless nights. And I think, we see that. And I think that does come hand in hand with running a business.
Yeah, I think, not to own horn, but having the right advisors at the right time is so powerful. I've had so many conversations with business owners that either don't know where to go or what to do. They've not been in this situation before, but they feel like because they're the boss, they need to know the solution, or everyone's going to look to them to know the solution. And so having someone to help you through that situation, be it an advisor or maybe it's another business, right? Some of the best outcomes of either of these people is just building a bit of a community around themselves and sharing, hey, no, I faced that issue as well, and I got that bit wrong, and this is what worked for me. And then kind of trialing that out is so powerful.
I think you've got to try and build a really good culture in your company as well. Like, you've got to go to work and enjoy what you do every day and the people you spend it with. I think one of the things we mentioned before was about wanting to keep key employees. I think if you can do that and build a really good culture, you'll naturally do that anyway. But I think people do appreciate the investment you make into your people as well, whether that's in development, but also fun stuff. Like, I know some of our clients have got like bars in there, they have like Friday beers at 4:00 type thing. It's just a nice little thing. You don't have to do it, but it's it's something that just gets everyone together. I think that's a nice way of kind of combating things. Yeah,
and I think another thing from drawing on that employee to business owner kind of relationship, I think when you work in bigger companies and you're not necessarily continuously seeing the people at the top, there can come this kind of facade that the people at the top are earning mega bucks and life's sweet for them, and in some instances that is the case. I would probably, after speaking to clients, I would argue that a lot of our clients actually take a reduced pay to keep the business afloat. So for a lot of employees, it's standard that you will get your salary every month and you know what's coming into the bank. For a lot of business owners, they don't know what they're going to get every month because they don't know what the cash flow is going to look like that month, especially when we're coming around things like the government budgets and changes in legislation, rises in NI. That's, for some businesses, that's an extra 75 grand a year that they've got to find.
Yeah.
Where do people think that's coming from?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to come out of your paycheck. Chances are it will affect people at the top. And I think sometimes people aren't understanding of that. I think, and I think sometimes actually we need to take a step back and go, whilst we're working for the people at the top, what are they working for and what are they giving back to us?
Yeah, I mean, I've so many business owners I've heard say, like, I'm the last one to get paid, right? Everyone else gets paid. All the suppliers, the rent, the staff, everyone gets paid, the government, and then whatever's left is mine.
Yeah.
But then you get to this guilt where they slog through those years, right? Taking minimum salary, maybe sometimes less than minimum wage some months. Yeah. And then they get to the point where they break through, right? Hopefully they break through and they're really profitable.
It's an investment into their future, isn't it?
But then there's a guilt about taking that. I've spoke to so many business owners like, well, what if my, talking about dividends shown on accounts and stuff. It's like, well, what if my staff see that I took 100 grand this year? And you're like, I get that, but did they not see that you only took 15 grand last year, or that you put 45 grand back into your business to cover the cash hole? And they almost then feel like the fear or the guilt around taking the good with the bad. So I think we need to destigmatise that idea that all business owners are rich.
Yeah, and I think on that as well, an employee gets a salary and they have a job spec, and that job spec tends to stay fairly consistent. You don't tend to waver off of what's on that job spec. I think for a business owner, they've got being the business owner as the overarching responsibility. I think what a lot of people don't understand is, and from my own experience, that's working until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, waking up early in the morning, not getting to spend time with your kids, not being comfortable going away on holiday and leaving the business. Obviously taking this reduced pay and not having a standard income, which, by the way, affects things like mortgage affordability and being able to have loans personally, because if your income's not consistent, you don't have access to things like that. And I think the standard stress of running a business is the professional stress, right? And that's what you have to deal with, and that's kind of part and parcel with the business. It's the personal stress that comes alongside that, and I think that's very difficult because business owners don't get respite. It's either professional or it's personal, and as one turns off, the other one turns on, and that tends to be the balancing act for them. And I think, we've seen it with your parents and we've spoken to them about it before. Nikki and Nigel work incredibly hard, and they go on the odd holiday to Florida, and people see the pictures come up of them, hand in hand, having a great time. They don't realise that they've worked for 12 hours of the day and then they've just gone out for dinner. And I think that's the other side of it. And, there's been instances within Ad Val that have been stressful, changes in legislation, how we adapt to that as a business. You can physically see the toll that it has on them. And I think that's quite a difficult thing to see, especially because we're all quite family-like within the business. And I think a lot of people don't have respect for that. And the physical aspect, that's what affects your life, right?
I think the holiday thing's a really great point. So I know when I've not had a holiday in a while, right? When I've not had a week off, or proper week off, so I'm taking a holiday to cover a few days here for kid care, doesn't really feel the same way. You've not switched your brain off, disconnected, unplugged from work, then I start to feel that burnout, right? You get into the top of that kind of burnout graph that we gets touted by every management consultant out there. But I vividly remember my first 5-6 years probably of being at Ad Val. Like Nikki and Nigel didn't have a proper holiday, right? They'd go on holiday to Florida, they'd wake up probably 7 o'clock their time, which is 2-3 o'clock our time, and they'd work those 3-4 hours of the back end of my day, the start of their day, before they got to enjoy their holiday. So they've not unplugged, they've not switched off, they've just crushed it into a shorter time frame. And then they'll go out in the afternoon and try and enjoy themselves, but they're back on at 7 o'clock the next morning, right? So if that was my holiday, I'm not coming back feeling refreshed. I've not gone back to the start of the graph where I'm ready to roll. And I think a lot of people don't see that kind of burnout potential of you don't get to properly just switched off for 2 weeks.
No. Yeah, and I had a lovely childhood, so I'm not sitting there saying that. But I think I think it is one of the things to just bear in mind. I think it's something that but it's a big commitment beyond that extends beyond when you see them in the office. There's emotional tolls that you could be working. I mean, they love what they do, right? So they absolutely love what they do, and that would be my kind of number one bit of advice: would just do what you love to do. Like, make sure you enjoy coming into the office every day. And I said earlier, but I think it's absolutely key to keep you wanting to get up at 7 a.m. and work for a couple of hours on your holiday. But I think one of the big things really is the toll that the negative stuff has. Because look, the reality is businesses that when it's good, it's great, right? And everyone, you can do all the fun stuff, you can do, but there are certain times that you have to feel the nitty gritty. And I think businesses do go through waves. And I think what business owners are really good at are celebrating success, letting everyone know when we're doing really well. But when it gets rough, that's when you need your key people, because not everyone feels comfortable in those rocky waters, or that they have, and that's fine. So you won't necessarily see how rough things can get at times, because a big part of being a business owner is to hold that weight on your shoulders and protect your team from it.
And the key people is such a good point there, right? Like, we're talking about having that support structure around you, having that team that help through those hard times. I think, again, going back to, said Nicky and Nigel's example, remember the first time Nigel came back and he was like, I managed to have a proper holiday. Like, we'd put in the senior management structure. We had heads of in each department that ran their team, that took responsibility for commercials, for anything that might go wrong. Yeah. And he come back and went, I managed to switch off. I didn't have to plug in and turn on at 7 o'clock in the morning because I knew it was covered. Yeah. I check my emails every now and again to make sure that nothing nuclear would happen. But if you can find that support structure, if you can build up that internal structure in your organisation, they can alleviate some of the pressure. You don't have to have it all on your shoulder. Yeah. You don't have to have every answer. You've just got to help lead the people that have got the answers and get them there.
Yeah. But that takes a lot of trust, right?
And you'll probably get burnt once or twice, right? We've seen it in Ad Val where people have got into senior positions and then almost completely changed. Yeah. And I think don't let that stop you from trusting people. Just build like better frameworks and freedom within frameworks so that if it goes wrong, it's not nuclear, but you do need to continue to trust people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we've spoken previously about imposter syndrome and what that means and how it can affect your career. I think a lot of business owners go through imposter syndrome and actually sometimes forget where they've come from and the journey of the business because they're so stuck in the detail day to day that they kind of forget to zoom out, look at it from a bird's eye point of view and go, wow, it has actually been a journey.
And we're doing well.
And we're doing well. So I think one thing, we've covered off a lot of things today. Some are slightly deeper than others. But the main thing is, what are business owners doing it for? And what's the end result?
Yeah, I think that leads quite nicely, I suppose, onto my side. So my role at Ad Valorem is I head up our acquisition strategy. So we're on a bit of a buy and build strategy of other accountancy firms, but in that I come across a lot of people looking at what the next kind of succession looks like and what they want to get out of the last 20 years or more quite often. I think it comes with different challenges. I think there's a legacy that they want to maintain. I think that can really, it can be a really difficult area. I think it's a really emotional time, particularly when you're looking at someone else. And I suppose that, imposter syndrome kicks in a slightly different way because the thought that someone else could potentially run your business better than you have is probably quite a scary thought. But you almost know that you want them to do that, but it's just a bit. It can be quite a kind of daunting mindset, really. I suppose
the drivers behind it, I think, were quite interesting. So when we first started talking to our business owners, or when I first get involved, so normally the deal was mostly done by the time you get involved.
Yeah.
But it's surprising that it's not always the financial driver that
no.
Which is the deal, right? It's are you going to look after my people? Will you allow that brand or that legacy to continue? And I think it's surprising some of the business owners themselves that it's not just about kind of the biggest sellout they can get. It's about going, no, this is my legacy. I've put 30 years into this and I want it to continue.
Well, it makes sense because I suppose when you sell a product, you're selling it on you're selling it on value, but that's not determined. It doesn't necessarily need to be a fee value. It doesn't need to be like a product price or whatever. they will pay a higher, buyers will pay a higher price for something that they feel they're going to get more value out of, whether that's that they feel good, whether that's, otherwise, a car's a car, for example, but what makes you pay 200 quid a month versus 500 quid a month?
Yeah, and I think a lot of business owners, as they go throughout the life cycle of the business and the running of it, I think sometimes people forget what's needed to be able to exit, and then at some point you are going to have to exit, and whether that's a complete closure or whether you do want to sell it. We have a lot of conversations with clients who aren't quite ready to leave their business and hand it over or sell it, so they look at things like MBOs and EOTs and things like that. I know it can be quite an emotive conversation. Whilst it can be good, there's also the flip side of going, actually, how you've run your business, because you've been so hands-on, it potentially isn't worth what you would predict it to be worth versus the effort that you've put in. So I think
it's worth more. It can go the other way as well.
Yeah, 100%. So there's two sides to the coin, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose it's the involvement, right? When we're planning for people to exit, we try and look 3 to 5 years in advance, right? So if you're like, I want to sell next year, it might be great, but it might be like, oh God, we've got a lot of work to do. Whereas if you're 3 to 5 years out, you go, great, can the business run without you? Can we get senior leaders
exactly.
that can take that day-to-day operation over, and you're more the strategic? And if you can get in that position, I think you're right, you get a much better price, but also you're leaving the business in a better position. Because
I totally agree.
Like linchpinned on you, and then we pull you out, it's just going to fall down, right?
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm looking at doing an acquisition, I'm looking at will the goodwill transfer, which effectively means will we be able to retain that business as it is right now? Would it stay as it is for the next however long? And then what sort of price would we pay for that? So that's the key. Those are the key things I'm looking at. I'm looking at does the owner do everything in the business? I'm looking at, is there good operations and business operations that sit there, or am I going to have to put that in, or are they going to have to leverage ours? And that can be the difference between different models. How much sort of money are they used to making? Are they taking good salaries and dividends out of the business? What does that look like? And really, it's then about the staff. So I think when we're doing due diligence on any firm or any acquisition, and if there's any clients that ask about it, we always recommend do good due diligence on the staff and the staff that you're kind of acquiring. And it's a little bit different, I guess, but I think a lot of business owners don't want to tell the staff they're looking to sell, and I think it depends on the situation, right? But from my experience, when we are doing a deal and we've built a good rapport and a good relationship with the staff, before we close that deal, it's much more likely to go ahead. You're going to get a better valuation out of it. If you're on an earn out, depending on the way the deal's structured, if you're on an earn out, you're more likely to get your earn out. And I think it works a lot more cohesively for absolutely everyone, because you're going into, you shouldn't be thinking of it as I'm selling my business and I'm stopping on day dot. You should be thinking of it as I'm going into a partnership with someone. That's the best way to do it. It's giving me what I need. Quite often clients and staff probably know something's going on anyway. So there's no point trying to hide things, in my opinion. But
I think that touched on one of the things we've not touched on is the evolution of an entrepreneur. So if you're a business owner and you're running it, you've got to be a different person when you set that business up and get it off the ground to when you're taking that business for its thrive phase and you've got out of that and you've got to put other people in. And then that sale phase, I mean, there might be some others in between. You've got to evolve who you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it to get the best outcome. And if you stay, some of the challenges I see where entrepreneurs can't do that evolution, they just hit a ceiling and they can't push beyond that critical mass. And then they also can't exit or sell because they can't extricate themselves from the day-to-day. That's one of the big things. Is a lot of other roles, you do the same thing every single day, you're going to be an absolute top performer, you're going to smash it out of the park. When you run a business, you've got to be able to evolve and adapt.
But I think on that as well, you kind of run the marathon as you're running a business, right? And that's a long slog and you're tired by the end of it. What I would argue is actually when you then go to sell, that's another race in itself. And I think when you get to the end of what you deem to be kind of your career in that business cycle, you need to make sure that you still got the fight at the end to go through that due diligence and that acquisition process and the selling process to make sure you get the best possible deal. Because there's nothing worse than when we're speaking to clients and they get to the point of selling and they've owned their business 20 years and they get offered pennies for it. And as their advisors, I find that, I almost take it personally, because I think actually I want you guys to get out of it what you put in. But
that comes from preparation. That I think a lot of that comes from preparation, and you know, I think it's investment they've put into the business over the years as well. Mm-hmm. You know, it takes, you know, a business that hasn't been built to grow is a perfectly good business. It's a perfectly viable business. If they're just taking out dividends, they just take everything out and just take it as a salary, that's fine. But think of it like you're paying yourself as you go. Whereas if you're growing it to build and you're investing as you go, you're going to have less cash earlier on in your business life cycle, if you want to call it that. But then you'll get to the end and you have something bigger that hopefully will sell for more, and it will be more scalable, more secure for someone to come in, whether it's PE, VC, strategic buyers. So that's the kind of way to think about it. And we've spoken to I've spoken to many firms that they're not ready to sell yet. They thought they were, because they wanted to exit, they wanted to retire, they're looking at the horizon, but the reality is their business isn't worth. I'm not going to say it's not worth as much as they think it is, right?
Because they've not taken the steps, right? It's like they put their house on the market without redecorating or without doing a few touch-ups or replacing the like cooker hood that's a bit broken. Like, you know, it could be done, and you kind of almost expect the new buyer to be like, oh, that'd be relatively easy to do. But unless you do it, they're going to look at the house next door that's been kitted out and is ready for sale. Mm-hmm. And I think it's almost, you know, it's that conversation business owners don't like to have. It's talking about the end and it's planning for that end. Mm-hmm. But it will be so much smoother and so much better if you plan for it versus if you just snap a few pictures and chuck it up on Rightmove. Yeah, you're not going to get the same value for your property. You're not going to get the same value for your business.
So I could talk a little bit from experience, I guess. Obviously, for the listeners' benefit, we went through a transaction end of July last year, was it?
Yeah, August
last year, which was a partial sale. It sold 51% of the shares. So that was my mum and dad. They're still heavily involved in the business, but it meant that they could it took the kind of financial burden off them, and the emotional impact has been significant. So post deal for them, you know, I know that dad at some point will want to retire over the next few years, but the thought of actually slowing down was great. And then when he started doing it, he was like, "Oh my, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with myself?"
Create a record label and sell.
But then he focused on his passion projects that was not necessarily entirely financially motivated. It was more because he's comfortable on that front. It means that weight's lifted, that burden's lifted, and they can focus on things they enjoy. And the reality is they enjoy what they do. So it might find that, I think entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, and I think it's ingrained in their DNA to an extent. And I think there's not many that will get to a point and will just completely shut up shop. They'll always have little projects going on. There'll always be little bits and bobs around it, whether it's investments. And, you know, if you've got a lump sum of cash, that's stressful enough as it is to have and manage, because you're not necessarily used to having that. If you're in a fortunate position, you are. But you know, it comes with its own little. It's a nice position to be in, but it's little kind of things you've got to work around there as well.
No, absolutely.
So we talked a lot about the challenges and some of the hurdles that a lot of business owners face. Probably worth touching on some of the positives. I think number one for me is probably the autonomy side that I tend to find in being involved, and the ability to make your own decisions as and when you want. You guys got any?
Money. I think that's a really big thing. I think being able to actually see the numbers and your hard efforts come to fruition is a massive thing as a business owner. And I think it's not easy running a business. I think a lot of people see it as it will always be a success. It's not. But when it is a success, and being able to stand back and kind of watch the graph go up, is a real thrill. And I think it makes a lot of business owners hungrier to continue to improve and continue to thrive.
And do you know what? I think it's actually being in control of your own money. Mm-hmm. It's probably more so than actually making the money itself. It's like that. You get out what you put in. Yeah. Most of the time.
Mm-hmm. I think how you do it as well. So obviously that's a big drive for most people, and one of the things I've seen working with a lot of business owners and in our own business is the absolute gear change when they can do it their way, when they put their ethics, their values in front and center of their company, and they can work with their customers the way they want. And comparing that to maybe being employed, where you're being beheld to somebody else's ethics and values that you might or might not agree with.
Yeah.
When you've got that mastery of your own destiny, you can go, no, we're going to do it this way because that's how I truly believe it should be done.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of amazing fulfillment in that I see from business owners when they finally do that.
Yeah, and I think as well, having people look at you for guidance, I think whilst that can give a massive amount of pressure, I think, again, using Ad Valorem as an example, people turning to Nikki and Nigel and saying, what is the answer? And people viewing you as super credible, I think is quite a nice thing for the ego, potentially. And
building on that, because I think that's true, but watching someone succeed. So we talked earlier on about it can be one of the hardest things you do, but also one of the most rewarding. And being a manager and managing a large team, when you see someone kind of go through those steps and move up the ladder and fill those roles that you need and really succeed in their career, like it's so rewarding. And I know, working alongside a lot of people in the business, working alongside Nikki and Nigel, when you see someone step in, take that responsibility, take ownership of that role and develop into it, so rewarding to know you gave them the opportunity to do that, you developed them, you helped them, and now they're a better version of themselves because of it.
Yeah.
And I think as well, a lot of people don't do well or don't feel comfortable or don't want to work for somebody else. So when you're your own boss, whilst you have got to get up at God knows what time in the morning to try and fulfill a day's work, also on the flip side, if there are days when you don't want to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you want a bit of a lie-in, you can also go, well, I can do that because it's, who's going to tell me off? Me.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So,
so cut yourself a bit of a... cut yourself a break, don't tell yourself off every day.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the important thing, enjoy it.
Yeah. Ride the lows, but enjoy the highs, I think is the key takeaway.
Make it what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we round things off, we're going to do a quick fire question round with Alex. So, first one's up. One thing business owners should start doing today to protect themselves from hidden costs.
Set really clear boundaries. I think we've spoken about the hidden cost being sort of that impact on you mentally and on your family. Sophie alluded to earlier on, right? The Saturday night complaints isn't a great place to start. Set your boundaries. You might have to bend them every now and again, but try not to. For me, and I've always wanted to be home to read my kids a bedtime story. So if I stay a little bit late, that's fine. But as long as I can get home in time to do the bedtime story, that's my boundary, and I don't break that. Yeah. I think it really saves you some of that mental load we've been talking about.
Biggest misconception people have about owning a business?
That you're going to get to do whatever you want whenever you want. That you're I think a lot of people that have never ran a business consider that business owners just get to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and are rich at the same time. And I don't think they see the hidden costs we've been talking about of the effort and the time and all of that goes into it.
And one piece of advice for making business ownership more sustainable long term?
Try and build a community, or if it's within your own organisation, that culture of helping each other, or if it's outside your own organisation. We've seen real success with linking in with other accountants, either in the same part of the world as us, or or not. And I think they face similar challenges. And when you realise that you're not on your own, it becomes you can carry on doing it, right? You know that other people have gotten through those challenges and you can push through it. So build a community, big, small, whatever it looks like, because I think it will really help you push through those hard times and ride the highs as well.
Thank you. So I personally feel like this is a really important conversation to have. I think the strategy and the stress that comes with owning a business should always be spoken about, and we should always try and support each other.
Yeah, and I think the right advice and the right support network makes a massive difference. Focus on building a really good team around you, and you can ride the rough with the smooth with them as well, and enjoy the ride.
100%. Thanks for coming on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Oh, God.